Remember to subscribe because what you are about to hear will make your mind thrilled. A routine traffic stop uncovered one of the darkest crimes in state history. Officer Daniel Hayes's hands shook as he radioed dispatch. The calm night had turned into the nightmare no officer ever expects. What began as a simple traffic stop had uncovered something he could never unsee. The car had been pulled over for speeding on Highway 42, a quiet road just outside Dayton, Ohio. Its driver, a tall man in his 40s with a calm smile, seemed ordinary. But when Daniel approached the vehicle, he noticed something unusual. The rear passenger door was slightly ajar, and the back seat smelled faintly sweet, almost like chemicals. Even if this was a traffic violation, Daniel thought, why would the passenger door be open, and why the smell? He knocked lightly on the window. The man inside, later identified as Eric Lawson, rolled it down slowly. He looked tired but polite, nodding at Daniel. "Evening, officer. Everything okay?" Daniel's instinct screamed. Something was off. He asked for his license and registration. While Eric reached into his glove box, Maria shone a flashlight toward the back seat. That's when they saw it, a large black duffel bag crammed into the corner. Daniel motioned for backup over the radio, his voice tense. "Dispatch, I need a unit here immediately. Possible high-risk situation. Suspect in vehicle. Unknown contents in back." Eric kept his hands visible, speaking softly, but Daniel noticed the nervous twitch in his fingers. The smell grew stronger, and Maria's eyes widened. Something inside that bag was heavy, and it moved slightly, as if it were alive, or had recently been alive. The officer stepped back slowly. Daniel ordered Eric to exit the vehicle. As Eric complied, he muttered, "There's nothing in there, you'll see." Daniel glanced at the duffel again, and then something happened that made his stomach drop. The duffel shifted again. A faint, muffled sound emerged. It was so quiet he thought he imagined it, but Maria shook her head, gripping her flashlight tightly. Daniel opened the bag with extreme caution. Inside was what he feared most, a human body, tightly bound, eyes closed, a gag across the mouth. Daniel stumbled backward, trying to suppress his nausea. "Dispatch, we have a 1054. Human remains. Suspect detained. Need full homicide team now," Daniel said, his voice trembling. Eric Lawson tried to speak, but Daniel cut him off. "Save it for detectives." The scene became a frenzy of police activity. Sirens screamed in the distance. Officers set up a perimeter. Forensic teams arrived within minutes. The highway was closed. News helicopters hovered above. What had been a simple speeding ticket had exploded into the worst nightmare Daniel Hayes had ever seen. As detectives took over, Daniel's mind raced. Who was this person? How long had Eric been traveling with a body in his car? Why had no one noticed sooner? He could see the fear in Eric's eyes, a mix of arrogance and panic. Detective Laura Benson, a veteran of 15 years, took charge. She looked at Eric with piercing eyes. "Start talking, Mr. Lawson, now." Eric's voice was low, calm, almost eerily normal. "You don't understand. You have to listen to me. I didn't mean for this to happen." Daniel's stomach churned. "You didn't mean to happen?" Detective Benson gestured to the body. Eric's eyes flickered toward it, but didn't look away. He was trembling now, a man who had hidden something unimaginable. "Where did you get them?" Benson asked. Eric swallowed hard. I found them. I mean, it wasn't planned. I thought I could help." Daniel Hayes stepped closer, gripping his radio. "Help? With what? Tell me now." Before Eric could answer, a sudden noise echoed from the passenger side of the car, a metallic clatter. Everyone turned, lights flashing, hearts racing. Something small fell from the back seat into the asphalt. It was a folder filled with papers. Daniel bent down to pick it up, shivering as he read the first line. "Confidential, state files, missing persons."
Daniel's eyes widened. Maria, his partner, grabbed the folder as detectives crowded around. These weren't random notes. These were official case files. Files that Eric shouldn't have had. Files that revealed dozens of missing people over several years. Detective Benson's jaw tightened. "Oh my God," she whispered. This is one of the darkest things this state has ever seen." Daniel looked back at Eric, who now seemed to crumble under the weight of what was about to be revealed. How long has this been going on?" Daniel asked, his voice barely a viper. Eric didn't answer. His calm facade had shattered. The air smelled of gasoline, sweat, and fear. Daniel glanced down the highway. Police tape flapped in the wind. The emergency lights reflected off the asphalt, painting everything in red and blue streaks. And then, as if to punctuate the terror, Eric made a sudden move toward the trunk. Detective Benson shouted, "Freeze!" Daniel's heart raced. Eric fumbled with the trunk latch. Maria aimed her flashlight. The detectives shouted commands. The world felt like it had stopped. Then the trunk creaked open, and that's when Daniel saw it. Something inside the trunk that made him stumble back, his breath catching in his throat. Something he never wanted to see in his life. Something that would haunt him forever. Before anyone could react further, Eric tried to grab something from inside. Chaos erupted. Sirens screamed. Officers yelled. Flashlights cut through the dark night. And in the middle of it all, the trunk door slammed shut, leaving the crowd frozen in shock. Daniel Hayes knew at that very moment that this was no ordinary crime. This was bigger, much bigger. And he was standing right at the beginning of one of the darkest cases the state had ever seen. The night was far from over, and the truth was just beginning to surface.
The night was cold, but the air in the police perimeter felt hotter than summer. Sirens flashed, radios crackled, and officers moved with precision, trying to secure the scene. Daniel Hayes's hands were still shaking, but he forced himself to focus. Detective Laura Benson had called for the forensic team, and soon they arrived, carrying equipment that looked like something out of a science lab. Eric Lawson was cuffed and placed in the back of a police SUV. He didn't resist, but his eyes darted around like a trapped animal. Daniel couldn't stop staring at him. There was something in those eyes, something that screamed he knew far more than he was letting on. The forensic team began examining the car. They carefully opened the trunk again, this time with every officer holding a flashlight and ready for anything. Inside, they found more than Daniel could have imagined. Several small boxes, neatly stacked, each labeled with dates and locations. Detective Benson pulled one out, her gloves shaking slightly. Inside the box were items belonging to missing people, personal belongings, photographs, letters. Daniel swallowed hard. Every box told a story of someone who had disappeared without a trace, some for months, some for years. The scale of Eric's actions was horrifying. This wasn't just a single crime. It was a network of secrets, hidden right under the state's nose. Daniel stepped back, his stomach turning. "How did no one notice this before?" he muttered. Maria Santos placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "She was careful," she said quietly, "almost too careful." Meanwhile, Detective Benson turned to Eric, who sat silently, head down. "You're going to tell us everything. Where are the others? How long has this been happening?" she demanded. Eric didn't answer. He just shook slightly, his jaw tight. Then something happened that made everyone jump. A faint sound, like a phone vibrating, came from Eric's pocket. Daniel moved closer. His hand fumbled, then pulled out a small black cell phone. The screen was cracked, but notifications were visible. Messages from unknown numbers, all recent, all with cryptic phrases like "delivered" and "safe." Detective Benson's eyes narrowed. "He's been in contact with someone, or something. There's more to this than we thought," she said. Daniel looked at the road behind the SUV.
The highway was empty now, except for flashing lights and the shadows of officers moving cautiously. He felt uneasy. Something about Eric's calmness made him suspect this was far from over. The officers decided to transport Eric to the county jail for questioning, but as they tried to place him in the SUV, Eric suddenly tensed. "Wait!" he shouted, his voice louder than before. The officers froze. "What now, Detective Benson?" demanded, her hand on her holster. Eric pointed toward the back seat. "The bag. Check it. There's something else, something you haven't found yet." Daniel's heart sank. He glanced at the trunk. They had gone through it twice already. Could there really be more? One of the forensic officers slowly opened the trunk again. Daniel stepped closer, shielding his eyes from the flashlight's glare. Then he saw it, a tiny envelope tucked in the corner, almost invisible. He picked it up and opened it carefully. Inside were photographs, Polaroids of locations, streets, and addresses, each marked with dates. Some were familiar, others unknown, but Daniel recognized the handwriting immediately. It matched the labels on the boxes. "These aren't just belongings," he whispered. "These are plans. He was tracking people, planning something more." Detective Benson took the envelope and examined it. Her face went pale. This could lead us to more victims, or worse, it could show us where he intends to go next. At that moment, Daniel's radio crackled. "All units, be advised. Highway 42, there's movement near mile marker 23. Unknown vehicle approaching fast. Could be related to Lawson." Daniel's stomach dropped. They weren't finished. Something or someone was still involved. Before anyone could react further, headlights appeared in the distance. A car barreled towards the police perimeter at high speed. Officers shouted, radios went wild, and everyone dove for cover. The car didn't slow down. It slammed into a barricade, throwing debris into the air. Daniel Hayes felt the ground shake beneath him. Glass shattered. The smell of smoke and burning rubber filled the air. Officers scrambled, pulling each other out of the way as the vehicle skidded dangerously close to Eric's SUV. Daniel's heart pounded. Whoever was in that car was not just reckless, they were dangerous, and they had a reason for coming here tonight. Detective Benson shouted orders, but chaos reigned. Daniel glanced at Eric, who now had a small, sinister smile. Something about that smile told Daniel everything. This was far from over. The smoke cleared slightly, and Daniel realized that the new extreme event, the car crash, was not random. This was part of a plan, and Eric Lawson was only the beginning. Daniel clenched his fists. The investigation had just become bigger, darker, and more deadly than anyone had imagined. And now they were all in danger.
The crash had left smoke curling over Highway 42, mingling with the flashing red and blue lights. Daniel Hayes coughed as he moved closer, his boots crunching on shattered glass. Officers were pulling debris away, checking for injuries, but Daniel's eyes were on Eric Lawson, still handcuffed in the SUV, sitting calm as if he had expected this. Detective Laura Benson knelt beside the envelope of photographs, scanning the images quickly. Her expression tightened. "Daniel, these are locations all over the state, safe houses, abandoned warehouses, and some of these addresses are connected to missing persons reports from the past 5 years. Daniel felt his stomach twist. The scale of this crime was far bigger than any of them had imagined, and now the attempted crash made it clear Eric wasn't acting alone. Someone else was helping him or protecting him. "Dispatch just called," Officer Santos said, breathless. "Another vehicle, heading north on Route 19. Could be a lead." Daniel felt his pulse quicken. Every instinct screamed danger. He motioned for backup and forensics to stay put. The crash was no accident. It was a warning. Someone didn't want them digging too deep. Meanwhile, Eric finally spoke. His voice was calm, almost bored. "You don't understand. You don't know what's coming." Daniel's eyes narrowed. "Explain, Eric, right now." Eric smirked faintly. "You'll see soon enough. They'll come for you if you get too close." Before anyone could respond, the distant wail of sirens grew louder. Police cruisers and emergency vehicles were racing in from every direction. It seemed the state had been put on high alert. But Daniel knew the sirens were not enough. Whoever was helping Eric had planned this carefully. They were fast, clever, and ruthless. Detective Benson studied Eric, frustration visible on her face. "We need to get him to the station, now. Find out everything about his accomplices before anyone else gets hurt." Daniel nodded, but as they approached the SUV, he noticed something unusual. Eric's shoes were scuffed in a strange pattern, almost like they had been intentionally worn down in certain areas. He bent closer and whispered to Benson, "These aren't random. He's leaving clues or warnings." Benson's eyes widened, or marking places he's been, or where he plans to go next. Before Daniel could respond, a police radio screeched. "All units, suspect vehicle reported at abandoned warehouse 10 miles west, unknown occupants, possible hostage situation." Daniel's heart leapt. The warehouse, he had seen it in one of the photographs in Eric's folder. His mind raced. Could it be one of the missing persons? Or worse, a trap? "Load him into the transport. We're going there," Benson said, her voice firm. Daniel and Maria helped move Eric into a secured transport van. The air was thick with tension. Eric looked out the window, his calm expression never wavering. He whispered something Daniel couldn't hear, then smiled faintly. It was chilling, and Daniel knew it wasn't just a smile, it was a warning. The convoy moved quickly along the dark roads. Daniel scanned the surrounding area for anything unusual, his flashlight cutting through the blue haze of the night. Every shadow looked like it could conceal a threat. Suddenly, headlights appeared in the distance, faster than they should have been. Daniel radioed ahead. "All units, we have visual contact. 2 vehicles following. Proceed with caution." Benson gritted her teeth. "They're trying to intercept us." Daniel's pulse raced as the first car swerved dangerously close to the transport van. Officers fired warning shots, but the vehicles didn't stop. Daniel realized instantly this was no random chase, it was coordinated. They were surrounded. The second car pulled alongside the transport, and for a terrifying moment, Daniel could see a masked figure leaning out, holding something metallic. A flash of steel reflected in the headlights, and Daniel's stomach dropped. Benson shouted orders. "Hold your positions. Don't engage unless necessary." Daniel grabbed the radio. "Back up. We need all available units, now. Suspect is armed." But before anyone could react further, the first car accelerated, crashing into a guardrail. Sparks flew, and the night lit up with explosions of metal and light. The impact sent debris flying, and the transport van swerved violently, almost tipping over. Daniel hung on to the seat, heart pounding. Amid the chaos, Daniel noticed Eric's calm demeanor again. His eyes glinted, almost mocking, as if he had predicted the entire attack. Then Daniel heard it, a scream from the back of the van, a loud, panicked voice. Someone was inside, someone they hadn't accounted for. The van jolted, and Daniel realized with a sinking feeling there was a hidden passenger, someone Eric had been keeping secret. Daniel's breath caught in his throat. This was no ordinary criminal. Eric Lawson had layers of darkness, each one worse than the last. And now, with another unknown person involved, the night had turned into a deadly trap. The convoy sped toward the warehouse, but Daniel knew the real danger was waiting there. Someone, or something, was already inside, and they were prepared. And when they arrived, the scene that awaited them would be more shocking than any traffic stop, more horrifying than any crime Daniel had ever seen. The warehouse loomed ahead, dark and silent except for the flashing red and blue lights of the police convoy. Daniel Hayes's hands gripped the door of the transport van tightly. His heart was pounding, his mind racing with possibilities. Eric Lawson had already shown them just how dangerous he could be, and now, with another hidden person involved, no one knew what awaited them inside. Detective Laura Benson stepped out first, signaling officers to take positions around the perimeter. "Stay alert. He's armed. There may be traps," she whispered, her voice calm but tense. The team moved cautiously, flashlights cutting through the thick darkness of the warehouse. Dust floated in the air, illuminated by the beams, giving everything a ghostly glow. Daniel's eyes darted from shadow to shadow, expecting movement at any second. Then they heard it, a faint, muffled voice. Someone was crying or begging. Daniel froze. "That's coming from inside," he said, pointing toward a large metal door at the back of the building. Benson nodded and motioned for 2 officers to cover the sides while Daniel approached the door. He could hear footsteps behind it, quick and nervous. The sound of breathing, uneven and panicked, echoed in the empty warehouse. Daniel reached for the handle, his gloved hand shaking slightly. He pulled the door open slowly. Inside, the dim light revealed a shocking scene. Several people were huddled together, tied to chairs, their faces pale and frightened. Some had been missing for months, others only a few days. The smell of dust and old wood filled the air, but the sight of them alive sent a wave of relief through Daniel. Eric Lawson stood nearby, leaning casually against a crate. He didn't resist, but his calm demeanor made Daniel's skin crawl. "Detective," Eric said, his voice eerily composed, "you made it." Benson stepped forward. "It's over, Eric. You're done. This ends tonight." Eric smiled faintly. "You don't understand. I had reasons. I was trying to control the chaos. People would have disappeared anyway. I just helped it happen." Daniel felt his stomach turn. The arrogance, the lack of remorse, it was chilling. He motioned to the officers. "Untie them. Get them out of here." As officers rushed to free the captives, Daniel approached Eric, gripping him firmly. But before he could speak, a loud metallic clatter echoed from the back of the warehouse. Daniel and Benson spun around, flashlights cutting through the darkness of the warehouse. One of the crates had fallen over on its own, revealing more evidence: boxes labeled with dates, personal belongings, documents detailing more victims, and even maps marking locations across the state. Daniel realized something terrifying. Even if Eric was caught, the network of crimes he had been part of might be bigger than anyone imagined. There were people out there, connected to this, who hadn't been caught yet. Suddenly, the lights flickered. A generator somewhere in the warehouse sputtered, then went out, leaving them in near-complete darkness. The only light came from flashlights and the emergency beams outside. Daniel's pulse quickened. A shadow moved in the corner. Daniel raised his flashlight, revealing a masked figure slipping toward the exit. "Stop!" he shouted. The figure froze, then bolted. Officers gave chase, but it was too late. The figure disappeared into the night. Daniel's stomach sank. Eric Lawson had been just one part of a much larger web. Detective Benson turned to him. "We've saved these people, but this isn't over. There's more we need to uncover, more answers we need." Daniel nodded, feeling the weight of the night pressing down on him. He looked at the captives, their faces filled with fear, relief, and confusion. Some had been through horrors that words couldn't describe, but they were alive, and that was something. Eric Lawson was handcuffed and led outside. His calm demeanor was gone now, replaced with resignation. Daniel watched him as he was loaded into a police cruiser, the flashing lights reflecting off his face. As the night finally began to quiet down, Daniel stepped back, breathing in the cool air. He thought about how a routine traffic stop had uncovered one of the darkest crimes in state history. A simple violation on Highway 42 had revealed a network of horrors, hidden right under everyone's noses. And he knew one thing for certain: perfect crimes didn't exist. There was always a mistake, a clue, a slip that could reveal the truth. Daniel glanced back at Detective Benson. "Do you think there's more we haven't found?" Detective Benson shook her head slightly, eyes narrowing. "We'll find out, but tonight we made a difference. Lives were saved. That's what matters." Daniel nodded. A sense of accomplishment mixed with unease settled over him. The night was over, but the investigation would continue. Somewhere, someone else might still be out there connected to this crime.
As they packed up the scene, Daniel thought about the headlines that would hit tomorrow. Routine traffic stop leads to state's darkest criminal discovery. The world would see the shock and horror, but they wouldn't understand the fear and tension of that night. And as the captives were driven safely away, Daniel knew one thing for certain: the truth always finds a way out. If you enjoyed this suspenseful crime story and want more shocking true crime cases,
Before we dive
subscribe to our
smash
channel
that subscribe
and hit the
button,
notification
hit
bell.
like,
You
and
won't want to
comment
miss
below
the
if
next
you
story.
think survival should
Comment
have been
below
possible,
if you noticed the
because
clues
what happened
before the
next on
detectives
Austria's
did.
highest peak will haunt you. The icy wind howled across the Großglockner, Austria's tallest mountain, carrying a bitter warning to anyone daring enough to climb in winter. Snow swirled like ghostly ribbons around the jagged summit, and the darkness was absolute, except for two small pinpricks of light, headlamps cutting through the storm, inching upward, step by treacherous step. Kirsten G. was 33, exhausted, her breath shallow and uneven. The snow under her boots shifted unpredictably, threatening to collapse beneath her weight. Her boyfriend, 36-year-old mountaineer Marcus L., moved with practiced precision, each step deliberate, confident. He had planned this climb. He knew the mountain. He knew the risks. And yet, something in the way he glanced back at her unsettled her. Minutes stretched into an eternity. The climb was supposed to be a challenge, a thrill, a shared conquest. But now, it was a nightmare. Kirsten's hands were numb, her fingers barely able to grip the ice axe. Her legs shook uncontrollably. Marcus, sensing her faltering, spoke softly. "We're almost there, just a little further." But his voice, calm and measured, carried a weight she couldn't place, a weight that didn't belong to someone who truly intended to help. Behind them, the webcam perched on the mountain lodge captured the ascent in chilling clarity. It recorded two headlamps climbing steadily. Hours later, it would show only one descending, the other vanishing into the storm as if it had never existed. Kirsten stumbled again, falling against a ridge of ice. Marcus steadied her, his hands firm. "You need to move," he said, urgency creeping in. But the snow was merciless, the wind slicing at her face, and her body screamed for mercy it would not receive. Every second stretched into minutes, every breath a battle against hypothermia. By the time they reached roughly 50 meters from the summit, it was clear Kirsten could go no further. Her body refused to respond. She collapsed against the icy rock, the storm claiming her energy faster than she could fight. Marcus looked down at her, the cold reflection of the snow masking any emotion in his face. Then, inexplicably, he did something that would shock the mountaineering world. He turned and started down the slope alone. The webcam captured the moment with horrifying precision. Kirsten's light disappeared into the darkness, leaving the screen hauntingly empty except for Marcus's descending figure. At that moment, the mountain became a silent witness to what prosecutors would later call an unimaginable act of neglect. Back in the valley, authorities began to piece together what had happened. Emergency calls, witness statements from other climbers, and the footage from that cold, lifeless camera started forming a picture of a night gone wrong. But even the investigators were unprepared for the evidence waiting at the summit. Something they had not anticipated. A clue so damning it could change everything. And that item would change everything. The chill of the Großglockner had not just frozen Kirsten's body, it had frozen the truth in place, waiting for investigators to uncover it. When the Alpine rescue team arrived at the desolate ridge, they were met with silence and snow thick enough to swallow footsteps. The wind had erased almost everything, but the one item left behind refused to be ignored. A split board, Kirsten's only piece of gear, abandoned carelessly in the snow. At first, it seemed innocuous, a piece of sporting equipment, but forensic experts quickly realized its significance. The splitboard had been positioned in a way that suggested it had been used as a last-ditch attempt to shelter her body from the wind. Whoever placed it there knew the mountain, knew the dangers, and yet it hadn't been enough to save her.
Marcus L. had returned to the valley by himself hours earlier, claiming he had gone to fetch help. But as investigators examined his story, discrepancies began to pile up like the snowdrifts on the ridge. GPS data from his phone and smartwatch showed precise movement patterns. No detours, no search for Kirsten. Every step he took led downward, straight to safety. His account of rescuing her started to unravel. Meanwhile, the webcam footage circulated quietly among authorities. Analysts enhanced the images frame by frame. The haunting sight of two lights ascending and one descending alone told a story that words could barely capture. But when investigators cross-referenced timestamps with weather data and witness reports from other climbers, a horrifying realization emerged. Marcus had spent nearly an hour above the ridge with Kirsten, an hour, and temperatures plunging to minus 20 degrees Celsius.
Back at Innsbruck, prosecutors began to build their case. Every detail mattered. Friends of Kirsten recalled her excitement before the climb, her trust in Marcus's experience. Interviews revealed that she had been a novice climber, relying entirely on him for guidance. Emails and texts confirmed that he had meticulously planned the expedition, checking weather reports and mapping the route. His knowledge gave him power. His knowledge also gave him responsibility, and it appeared he had failed to uphold it. But just as the investigation seemed to point clearly toward negligence, a new, darker layer emerged. A witness, another mountaineer, reported seeing Marcus with Kirsten earlier in the climb, speaking sharply, almost aggressively. The tone, the body language, all suggested tension. Could this have been more than a tragic miscalculation? Could there have been anger, impatience, a cold disregard for her survival? Then came the discovery that would shock even seasoned investigators. In the snow, partially buried, lay a waterproof journal belonging to Marcus. Inside were meticulous notes about the climb, but one entry stood out. Dated the morning of the ascent, it contained a single, cryptic sentence. "If she can't make it, she won't survive." The investigators stared at it in disbelief. Was this a premonition, or something far more sinister? As prosecutors and detectives pored over the evidence, it became clear that this was no ordinary accident. Every trail of footprints, every timestamp, every abandoned piece of gear painted a picture of betrayal in the harshest environment on the continent. And the mountain itself, towering and indifferent, had preserved the truth in its frozen silence. The world waited, breathless, as the case moved toward charges. But just as it seemed the story was reaching its peak, a new, darker layer surfaced. Someone else had been on the mountain that night. Someone who might have seen more than anyone expected. Before the trial even began, the alpine community was abuzz. Everyone knew the footage. Everyone had seen the images of Kirsten's light fading into the storm while Marcus descended alone. But investigators now had a new variable, an anonymous witness who claimed to have seen the pair higher up on the ridge just hours before disaster struck. This witness, another climber sheltering in a small snow cave, had been documenting the ascent on a handheld camera. What emerged from their footage was chilling. Marcus and Kirsten arguing fiercely, voices barely audible over the wind. At one point, Marcus's gestures were aggressive, almost commanding. The witness later said, "He didn't seem worried about the snow or the mountain. He seemed frustrated with her, angry even." The prosecution pieced together a timeline. Kirsten, exhausted and hypothermic, had reached the point of no return. Marcus, armed with knowledge, strength, and planning, had choices, and he chose to leave her. The mountain's unforgiving cold did the rest. Yet the witness's footage introduced a new layer of complexity. There was a window, a moment, when rescue could have been possible. And that choice not made, prosecutors argued, was the line between tragic accident and criminal negligence. When Marcus was finally brought to court, the tension in the room was palpable. His demeanor, calm, almost detached, contrasted sharply with the grief-stricken families in the gallery. The jury listened to the webcam evidence, the GPS trails, the split board, the journal, And now the witness footage. Every detail, every freeze frame pointed toward a chilling conclusion. Marcus had abandoned Kirsten, leaving her to die in conditions any human could not survive. But just as the case seemed airtight, the defense revealed its bombshell. Another climber, a distant acquaintance of Marcus, testified that Kirsten had, earlier in the climb, insisted on pushing for the summit despite exhaustion. According to the testimony, Marcus had repeatedly warned her, tried to get her to turn back, and even offered shelter, which she refused. The courtroom collectively held its breath. Could this tragedy have been unavoidable? A collision of inexperience and nature's fury? The jury deliberated for hours, each detail scrutinized, each timeline replayed in their minds. Outside, the alpine winds howled as if echoing the verdict. And then came the sentencing. Marcus was found guilty of grossly negligent manslaughter. The mountain claimed Kirsten, but the law claimed accountability. Yet even as the case closed, the haunting images from the webcam continued to circulate online, replayed by those who couldn't comprehend how a human could leave another to die in such circumstances. The split board, the journal, the last light disappearing into the darkness, these were the permanent imprints of a tragedy that would never be forgotten. Months later, climbers returning to Grossglockner reported an eerie feeling near the ridge where Kirsten had fallen. Some swore they saw a faint light, flickering like a headlamp in the distance, always just out of reach. Others whispered that the mountain itself was keeping watch, a silent testament to betrayal, hubris, and the thin line between survival and death. If this story was intense, hit subscribe, because the truth of human nature is far darker than any storm, and the mountains, they never lie.